Poor student refused to cheat on exam. The words echoed in Marcus Bennett's mind as he stared at the campus bulletin board, his eyes scanning past the notice without truly seeing it. That was him now, the poor student. The one whose threadbare coat couldn't keep December's bite at bay, whose stomach had forgotten what full felt like, whose pride had been whittled down to something small enough to fit in his pocket alongside the 37 cents that constituted his worldly wealth. The university hallway bustled around him, students in expensive winter coats laughing as they passed, their concerns limited to weekend plans and upcoming holiday breaks. None of them seemed to notice the trembling in Marcus's hands as he clutched his worn backpack strap, knuckles white with effort. 3 jobs, 2 night shifts, 1 dream slipping through his fingers. Marcus had been so close. A full academic scholarship had carried him through 3 years of his engineering degree at Westlake University, his ticket out of the generational poverty that had defined his family for decades. Then 6 months ago, his mother's cancer diagnosis had changed everything. The scholarship covered tuition, not life. Not the bus rides to the hospital, not the co-pays for treatments insurance barely touched, not the rent when his mother could no longer work. So Marcus had done what needed doing. He'd taken whatever jobs he could find, stocking shelves at midnight, delivering food during lunch breaks, tutoring on weekends. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Studying happened in stolen moments between shifts, on bus rides, in hospital waiting rooms, while his mother received treatments that drained both her body and their meager savings. His GPA had begun its steady decline during midterms. Now, with finals week approaching, Professor Harrington's advanced engineering physics exam loomed like an executioner's axe. Fall below a 3.0 and the scholarship vanished. Without it, so did his future. "You look like you're carrying the world, Bennett." Marcus startled, nearly dropping the textbook he'd been clutching. Professor Harrington stood beside him, salt and pepper eyebrows drawn together in what might have been concern. A tall, austere woman with piercing gray eyes, she had a reputation for brilliant lectures and merciless grading. "Just tired, Professor." The lie came easily after months of practice. She studied him with the same analytical precision she brought to complex equations. "My office hours are at 4 today. I suggest you make use of them before the final." Before Marcus could respond, she was gone, heels clicking authoritatively down the hallway. He exhaled slowly, shoulders slumping under the weight of everything unsaid. His shift at the convenience store started at 4, another opportunity slipping away. The tiny apartment was dark when Marcus returned at 2 a.m. He moved quietly through the cramped living room, past the sofa bed where his mother slept, her once robust frame now fragile beneath the blankets. The soft wheezing of her breath was the only sound as he made his way to the kitchen table. His desk, study space, and tonight, his bed. He couldn't risk disturbing her by unfolding the creaky cot. He spread his textbook beneath the weak light of his phone's flashlight. 4 hours until his next shift. 3 days until Harrington's final. The numbers and equations blurred before his exhausted eyes. "Marcus," his mother's voice, thin but concerned, drifted from the darkness. "You need to sleep, baby. Just reviewing some formulas." He kept his voice light, casual. She didn't need his burdens added to her own. "Go back to sleep, Mom. You're working too hard." The blankets rustled as she shifted. "Your father would be so proud of you." The mention of his father, gone 8 years now, squeezed something tight in Marcus's chest. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really?" Another lie, smooth from repetition. In truth, he was drowning. The material that had once come naturally to him now seemed written in a foreign language. His mind, dulled by exhaustion and worry, couldn't hold on to complex concepts. Last week's practice exam had earned him a score that made his stomach drop. 58%. Not even close to passing, let alone maintaining his scholarship. When his mother's breathing deepened into sleep again, Marcus allowed himself one moment of weakness. He buried his face in his hands and felt the hot sting of tears he wouldn't permit to fall. One breakdown would collapse the fragile scaffolding holding his life together. His phone buzzed with a text message. Strange at this hour. "Unknown number. Heard you're struggling with Harrington's class. I can help. Check your campus mailbox tomorrow." Marcus stared at the message, suspicion immediately flaring. Everyone knew Harrington's final was notorious. Different every year, impossible to predict. What kind of help could some anonymous texter offer? He didn't respond, but sleep proved even more elusive after that. "Someone home?" The campus mail center was nearly empty the next afternoon during the brief window between Marcus's morning class and his lunch delivery shift. His mailbox rarely contained anything. Who would write to him? But today a plain white envelope waited inside, his name printed neatly on the front. No return address. He opened it with cautious fingers while standing beside his ancient Honda Civic in the parking lot. Inside was a single sheet of paper with what appeared to be a comprehensive answer key to Harrington's final exam, complete with diagrams, formulas, and detailed explanations. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. This was exactly what the text had promised. Help that crossed every ethical line he could imagine. This was cheating, plain and simple. He leaned against his car, suddenly dizzy. With this, he could guarantee his grade, secure his scholarship, continue his education, take care of his mother. All it would cost was everything his parents had ever taught him about integrity. Sometimes the system is rigged against people like us, his father had once said. That's why we have to be twice as honest, twice as hardworking, because our integrity is something they can never take from us. Marcus crumpled the paper in his fist, then carefully smoothed it out again. He couldn't afford to fail. His mother couldn't afford for him to fail. Another text buzzed on his phone from the same unknown number. Did you get it? No one will know. Everyone does it. Marcus slipped the paper back into the envelope, his hand trembling. He needed time to think. The night before the exam, Marcus sat in the hospital beside his mother's bed. An unexpected complication had landed her back in the emergency room, her body too weak to fight off a simple infection. The doctors had administered antibiotics and assured him she would recover, but the fear that had gripped him when he'd found her feverish and disoriented still hadn't released its hold. You should go home and study, she whispered, her hand cool and light in his. Your big test is tomorrow. I'm exactly where I need to be, he said, managing a smile despite the knot of anxiety in his chest. The envelope sat in his backpack, untouched since he'd received it 3 days ago. He'd neither memorized its contents nor destroyed it, trapped in a purgatory of indecision. The mysterious texter had sent 2 more messages, one offering additional study materials, another reminding him that smart students do whatever it takes to succeed. His mother drifted into medicated sleep, and Marcus pulled out his actual notes instead of the envelope. He studied under the harsh fluorescent lights until a nurse gently suggested he get some rest. She's stable, the nurse assured him. The antibiotics are working. And don't you have finals? Marcus nodded, gathered his things, and kissed his mother's forehead before leaving. In the hospital parking lot, he sat in his car without starting the engine, staring at the envelope he'd finally removed from his backpack. One choice, diverging paths. His entire future hanging on tomorrow's exam. He thought of his mother, fighting with quiet dignity against a disease that ravaged her body but couldn't touch her spirit. He thought of his father, who had worked 2 jobs until the day he died, but never once cut corners. He thought of the kind of man he wanted to be, the kind of man they had raised him to be. With steady hands, Marcus tore the envelope into tiny pieces and scattered them in a trash can. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would face it honestly. The examination hall hummed with nervous energy as students filed in, clutching coffee cups and whispering last-minute formulas to each other. Marcus took his assigned seat, setting down his calculator and the 2 permitted pencils with mechanical precision. He'd managed 3 hours of sleep and spent the pre-dawn studying by the weak light of his desk lamp. Professor Harrington stood at the front of the room, her sharp gaze missing nothing as she surveyed the anxious faces before her. You have 3 hours for this examination, she announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs. This test accounts for 60% of your final grade. I expect nothing less than your absolute best work. Her eyes seemed to linger on Marcus for a moment longer than the others. Had she somehow known about the answer key? Did she suspect him? The exams were distributed face down. Marcus stared at the blank back of the paper, heart pounding so loudly he was certain others could hear it. You may begin. He turned the paper over and felt his stomach drop. The problems were nothing like what he'd glimpsed in the envelope. Different concepts, different applications, entirely different questions. The answer key would have been useless anyway. For one bitter moment, he felt foolish for his moral stand. It would have gained him nothing. Then something shifted inside him. He hadn't cheated. Whatever happened next, that victory belonged to him alone. Marcus picked up his pencil and began to work. 2 hours later, his hand cramped from writing and his mind exhausted from the mental gymnastics required, Marcus approached the problem that had stumped him completely. Question 8, worth nearly 20% of the exam. He stared at it, reading and rereading, searching for an entry point into its complexity. Nothing came. Minutes ticked by. Students around him turned in their exams and left, their faces showing varying degrees of confidence or despair. Marcus remained, alternating between question 8 and the others he wasn't entirely confident about. When only 15 minutes remained, he noticed something peculiar. There at the bottom corner of the exam paper, almost hidden in the margin, was a tiny handwritten note. Sometimes the hardest problems reveal our true character. Choose wisely. The handwriting matched Professor Harrington's precise script. Marcus looked up, meeting her watchful gaze from the front of the room. She gave nothing away, her expression as impassive as ever. With sudden clarity, Marcus understood. This wasn't just about physics or formulas. This was about character under pressure. About choices when everything that matters hangs in the balance. He returned to question 8 and wrote in clear, deliberate strokes, "I don't know the solution to this problem. I could pretend otherwise or attempt to derive partial credit through manipulation of formulas, but that would be dishonest. I've worked through this exam to the best of my current ability, which has been compromised by personal circumstances beyond my control. I accept the consequences of my limitations today, but I also know that limitations can be temporary. Given another opportunity, I believe I could master this material." He turned in his exam 5 minutes before the deadline, certain he had failed both the test and himself. "Mr. Bennett," Professor Harrington called as he reached the door. "A moment, please." The remaining students watched curiously as Marcus approached her desk, his feet heavy with dread. "Yes, Professor? I'd like to see you in my office tomorrow morning at 8. Her tone revealed nothing. "Don't be late." Marcus nodded, the weight of his future crushing down on his shoulders as he left the examination hall. That night, another text arrived from the unknown number. "How did it go? Did our materials help?" Marcus finally replied, "I didn't use them. I made my own choices." The response came quickly. "Interesting choice. We'll see if it was the right one." He stared at the cryptic message until his eyes burned, then set his alarm for morning and fell into restless sleep. Professor Harrington's office was Spartan. Bookshelves filled with physics texts, a desk clear of all but a laptop and a single stack of papers, and walls adorned only with her degrees and a large frame photograph of a spiral galaxy. No personal touches, no hints at a life outside academia. "Sit down, Mr. Sir Bennett." She gestured to the chair across from her desk without looking up from the paper she was reading. His exam, he realized with a surge of anxiety. He sat, hands folded in his lap to hide their trembling. "Do you know why I asked you here?" She finally asked, setting the exam aside and fixing him with that penetrating gaze. "I assume it's about my performance on the final," Marcus replied, keeping his voice as steady as possible. Partially, she leaned back in her chair. "I'm curious. Did you receive an offer of assistance for my exam? Perhaps an answer key?" The question hit like a physical blow. She knew. Somehow she knew. Marcus drew a deep breath. More lies would only compound his failure. "Yes, I received an envelope with what appeared to be exam answers." "And did you use this material?" "No." The single word carried the weight of his choice. "I considered it. I needed to pass your class to keep my scholarship. But I couldn't do it that way." Professor Harrington's expression remained unreadable. "Even knowing what was at stake for your future? For your mother's care?" The mention of his mother startled him. How much did she know about his personal situation? "Especially because of what's at stake," Marcus said quietly. "Some prices are too high, no matter the reward." Something shifted in Professor Harrington's eyes. A flash of what might have been approval. "Your answer to question 8 was unconventional." Marcus felt heat rise in his face. "I couldn't solve it. I chose honesty over pretense." "Yes, you did." She reached into her desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "That's precisely why I'm giving you this." Confused, Marcus accepted the envelope. His name was written on the front in elegant script. "Open it," she instructed. Inside was an official letter on university letterhead. "Dear Mr. Bennett, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Maxwell Integrity Fellowship. This fellowship provides full academic funding, a monthly living stipend, and comprehensive medical coverage for dependents for the remainder of your undergraduate studies and continuing through graduate work should you choose to pursue it. Your selection was based not only on your academic potential, but on demonstrated character under extreme duress. We believe character forms the foundation of true excellence. Congratulations on passing the real test. Sincerely, the Maxwell Foundation Board." Marcus read the letter 3 times, his mind refusing to process the words. "I don't understand," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Professor Harrington's severe expression softened slightly. The Maxwell Fellowship is awarded annually to one student who demonstrates exceptional integrity when faced with significant hardship. The physics exam was challenging, yes, but it was also a character assessment. We deliberately placed temptation in your path. You sent the answer key? Marcus asked, pieces beginning to fall into place. The foundation did, as did the text. All candidates received similar opportunities to compromise their integrity. You were one of only two who refused. Marcus stared at the letter, its implications slowly dawning. The medical coverage will cover your mother's treatments, yes. The stipend will eliminate the need for your multiple jobs, allowing you to focus on your studies and your family. The room seemed to tilt as emotion overwhelmed him. After months of desperate struggle, of watching opportunities slip away, of feeling the ground crumbling beneath his feet, solid footing at last. Why me? He asked. How did I become a candidate? Professor Harrington's mouth curved in the first genuine smile he'd ever seen from her. I nominated you. I noticed my students, Mr. Bennett. I've watched you fight to stay afloat this semester without excuses or shortcuts. When I learned about your mother's condition through Professor Williams, I knew you were exactly the kind of student Maxwell searches for. I nearly failed your class, Marcus admitted, still struggling to process this reversal of fortune. You were sleep-deprived and overwhelmed, yet you still grasped the core principles. Knowledge can be gained, integrity must be innate. She stood, indicating their meeting was concluding. The foundation will contact you about next steps. In the meantime, get some rest. You've earned it. Marcus rose on unsteady legs, clutching the letter that had just rewritten his future. Thank you, Professor. I don't know what to say. You've said everything that matters through your actions. She extended her hand, and as they shook, she added, Oh, and regarding your actual exam performance, you passed. Not brilliantly, but adequately. We'll work on that next semester when you're not working 3 jobs. The hospital room was brighter today, winter sunlight streaming through the window as Marcus's mother sat up in bed. Her condition improved enough for discharge later that afternoon. You look different, she said, studying his face as he entered. Did something happen? Marcus sat beside her bed, taking her thin hand in his. How to explain that everything had changed in a single morning? That the universe had suddenly shifted from cruel indifference to unexpected grace? I passed Professor Harrington's exam. He began, the simplest truth first. His mother's face lit with pride. I knew you would. You've always been so brilliant, even when you were little. And Marcus continued, his voice catching. I received a fellowship. A big one. He explained, the Maxwell Integrity Fellowship, watching comprehension dawn in her tired eyes, followed by tears that matched his own. The medical coverage, she started. Covers everything, he finished, squeezing her hand. You can focus on getting better. I can focus on school. We're going to be okay, Mom. She reached up to touch his face, her palm cool against his cheek. Your father always said your character would take you places. Your circumstances couldn't. He was right. Marcus thought of the torn envelope, of the moment he'd chosen the harder path without knowing where it led, of question 8 and his honest answer, of Professor Harrington's words, character forms the foundation of true excellence. Later that evening, as his mother slept peacefully in her own bed for the first time in days, Marcus received one final text from the unknown number. Congratulations, Maxwell Fellow. Your journey is just beginning. He sat at the kitchen table, no longer his makeshift bed, and opened his physics textbook, not out of desperate necessity, but with renewed purpose. Outside, snow began to fall, soft white flakes catching the glow of streetlights. The world looked different somehow, transformed not just by winter's touch, but by the realization that sometimes integrity isn't just its own reward. Sometimes when you stand firm in the darkness, holding fast to what you know is right, even when it seems foolish or futile, the universe notices. Not always, perhaps not even often, but sometimes, and sometimes that makes all the difference. Spring semester brought changes that would have seemed impossible only months before. The Maxwell Fellowship had transformed Marcus's life in tangible ways. His mother receiving cutting-edge treatment from specialists, their move to a small but comfortable apartment closer to campus, his schedule now dedicated to studies rather than survival. But the most profound changes weren't material at all. Mr. Bennett, would you care to explain your approach to this problem? Professor Harrington asked during an advanced seminar, her gaze no less intimidating despite their new connection. Marcus rose confidently, explaining his methodology to the class of 20 elite engineering students. When he finished, Harrington nodded, her version of effusive praise. Precisely. Notice how Bennett identified the underlying pattern rather than applying the formula by rote. This is the difference between engineering and true innovation. After class, she stopped him. The Maxwell Foundation is hosting a reception next week for current and past fellows. Business attire, 7 o'clock, President's Hall. She handed him an embossed invitation. Bring your mother if she's feeling up to it. She's responding well to the new treatment, Marcus said. I think she'd love to come. Excellent. There are people I'd like you both to meet. Professor Harrington gathered her materials, then added, You've impressed a lot of people this semester, Bennett, not just with your academic improvement. How so? You started that study group for struggling first years, volunteered for the engineering outreach program in underfunded high schools, all while maintaining a 3.8 GPA and caring for your mother. She raised an eyebrow. The fellowship removed obstacles. What you've chosen to do with that freedom reveals character. Marcus hadn't thought of it that way. The study group had begun when he noticed a freshman struggling with the same concepts that had once baffled him. The volunteer work felt like giving back, creating ripples of opportunity for others who might not otherwise see college as an option. The Maxwell Foundation believes that when you lift one person, they lift others. Professor Harrington continued, We call it the integrity cascade. You're proving the theory correct. The reception was held in the university's most elegant hall, usually reserved for donor events and presidential functions. Marcus adjusted his borrowed tie nervously as he escorted his mother into the grand space. She looked beautiful tonight. Some color returned to her cheeks, wearing a simple blue dress they'd found at a consignment shop. Marcus, a familiar voice called from across the room. Professor Williams, his literature professor from sophomore year, approached with a warm smile. And you must be Mrs. Bennett. I'm delighted to meet you. As introductions continued, Marcus began to understand something startling. Professor Williams hadn't just happened to know about his mother's condition. She was on the Maxwell Selection Committee. So was Professor Abernathy from mathematics, and Dean Richards, who now engaged his mother in conversation about her improving health. Confused? Professor Harrington appeared at his elbow, looking almost approachable in a dark blue suit instead of her usual severe black. A little, Marcus admitted. How many people were involved in selecting me? The Maxwell process is thorough, she said. We observed candidates for months before the final test. Your consistency impressed us. You remain the same person whether anyone was watching or not. Before Marcus could process this, a distinguished older man approached them. Elizabeth, is this our newest fellow? Indeed. Marcus Bennett, may I introduce Dr. James Maxwell, founder of the Maxwell Foundation. Marcus shook hands with the man whose philanthropy had changed his life. It's an honor, sir. I can't thank you enough for... No thanks necessary, young man. We invest in character because we believe it yields the highest returns. Maxwell's eyes were kind but penetrating. Tell me, how is your mother's treatment progressing? The conversation flowed easily as Maxwell shared his own story, how he'd built his fortune in technology, but found his purpose in identifying and supporting promising students whose circumstances belied their potential. The test, you know, Maxwell said quietly as they stood slightly apart from the crowd. It's different for each candidate. Yours was academic integrity. For others, it might be standing up to peer pressure, or returning found money, or defending someone being mistreated. We look for the moment when doing the right thing costs something significant. Why integrity specifically? Marcus asked. Why not just academic brilliance? Maxwell's gaze turned distant. Because I once hired the most brilliant engineer I'd ever met. Harvard education, perfect GPA, revolutionary ideas. He also falsified safety data to meet deadlines, and 3 people died when his design failed. He returned his focus to Marcus. Intelligence without integrity is dangerous. Character creates the boundaries within which brilliance can safely operate. Later, as Marcus and his mother prepared to leave, a young woman approached them. She seemed vaguely familiar, though Marcus couldn't place her. I just wanted to say congratulations, she said, extending her hand. I'm Zoe Chen. I was the other student who passed Professor Harrington's integrity test this year. Recognition dawned. You're in my Thursday physics lab. I didn't realize... That's rather the point. She smiled. The foundation is discreet, but I recognized you at the reception and wanted to introduce myself properly. Her expression grew more serious. I almost used the answer key, you know? My family lost everything in a house fire last semester, and I was desperate. What stopped you? Marcus asked. My grandmother's voice in my head, Zoe said simply. She raised me after my parents died. She always said, When you have nothing else, your integrity remains. She passed away last year, but in that moment, facing that choice, I could hear her so clearly. Before they parted, Zoe suggested they meet for coffee sometime to discuss their experiences. Marcus agreed readily, something warm and unexpected unfurling in his chest at the connection with someone who understood exactly what he'd faced. Coffee with Zoe became a weekly tradition. They discussed classes, shared strategies for their fellowship responsibilities, and gradually, tentatively, revealed more of their personal stories. She was brilliant, funny, and possessed a quiet strength that reminded Marcus of his mother. By late spring, their friendship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, but both welcomed with cautious joy. On a warm evening, as they walked the campus paths illuminated by the golden light of sunset, Zoe took his hand. "You know what I think is strange?" she said, her fingers fitting perfectly between his. "If neither of us had made that choice, to refuse the easy way out, we might never have known each other." Marcus considered this, the seemingly random connections that formed the tapestry of a life. One choice, diverging paths, and yet they converged again, she finished, squeezing his hand. As they continued walking, Marcus reflected on the anonymous note that had ultimately revealed so much more than a secret test. It had revealed something essential about himself, and opened doors he hadn't known existed. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "Great news from the doctor today. Scans show significant improvement. We're winning, baby." Marcus showed the message to Zoe, who wrapped him in a tight embrace as tears of relief spilled onto his cheeks. "See?" she whispered against his ear. "Sometimes doing the right thing changes everything." Later, sitting on a bench beneath a canopy of stars, Marcus thought about the cascade of events that had transformed his life. A mother's illness, a professor's watchful eye, a test of character, a fellowship that changed everything, a friendship blossoming into something more. The universe's mysterious economy, where integrity became currency for opportunities that money couldn't buy. He had refused to cheat on an exam, never suspecting it was a secret scholarship test. The anonymous note had revealed not just an opportunity, but a truth about himself he had always known, but never fully trusted. That who you are when everything is at stake defines you more clearly than who you are when nothing is. Some lessons couldn't be taught in classrooms or measured on exams. Some knowledge could only be earned through choices made in darkness, when no one is watching except perhaps the very people who can change your life with a single letter, a single opportunity, a single recognition of the character you've built, choice by choice. Marcus looked up at the vast sky above, at the endless possibilities stretching before him like the infinite stars, and knew with quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not because of luck or privilege or even intelligence, but because when it had mattered most, he had chosen integrity. And sometimes when you honor what matters most, the universe conspires to honor you in return.